It's late in Hanoi. The street in front of the bank headquarters is almost empty, just a few yellow streetlights spilling onto the wet pavement. On one of the upper floors, the international payments room is still lit, but only one person is left inside. Lan pulls her thin jacket a little tighter, eyes glued to the monitor. All day she's been approving SWIFT transfers, dozens of them, long strings of numbers as dry and mechanical as a machine's breathing. She tells herself, just a few more minutes, finish this last batch and then head home for a late dinner with her mom. Right then, a new transfer pops up. Over 1 million euros, headed to a small bank in Slovenia. The cold number on the white screen makes Lan freeze for a second. In the world of global finance, that might be a mid-sized transaction. But to her, it looks like more money than she could ever earn in a lifetime of work. The beneficiary's name is completely unfamiliar. The payment description is just a few vague words, nothing like the detailed invoices Lan is used to seeing. The transaction time sits right up against the end-of-day cutoff, a moment when big transfers almost never show up. Her mouse pointer hovers over the approve button. Lan knows that with a single click, this money will slide through the system like any other transaction. For a moment, she can hear her own heartbeat louder than the whir of the office fan. A part of her wants to just click, shut everything down, and step out into the cold night air. But there's a tightness in her chest, a little voice built from years of staring at screens like this, whispering that something here is off. Lan pulls her hand back, takes a deep breath, and mutters almost to herself, "No, I need to double-check this." From that tiny decision, on a quiet night in Hanoi, a massive online bank heist that almost succeeded starts to slow down. To really understand why Lan's hesitation mattered so much, we have to zoom out for a second and look at the world she's sitting in. The bank where she works isn't some Wall Street giant. It's a mid-sized commercial bank in Vietnam, headquartered in the noisy heart of Hanoi. To most people passing by, it's just another glass building. But to the people inside, it's where they pour their 20s and 30s, trying to build a steady life for their families. Lan grew up in a small province in northern Vietnam. Her parents were low-paid government workers, the kind who stretched every paycheck to the end of the month. Since she was a kid, she kept hearing the same advice. Study hard, get into a bank one day, have a stable job, insurance, a decent salary, and life will be easier than it was for your parents. For her, making it into the international payments department is already a quiet kind of success. There's no luxury office, no fancy car waiting downstairs. Just a swivel chair, a computer screen, and the responsibility of watching over invisible streams of money flowing in and out of her country every single day. Lan's work is tied to a system most of us never actually see, but it touches millions of lives. It's called SWIFT, a secure messaging network for financial institutions. In simple terms, it's the language banks use to talk to each other across borders. When a Vietnamese company pays for machinery from Europe, when a student wires tuition to a university in the US, when someone abroad sends money back home to their mom in the countryside, somewhere in the background a SWIFT message is being sent, precise down to each character. From Lan's side of the screen, each message is just a standardized string of codes and numbers. But behind every one of those messages is a story. A family scraping together money for medical treatment. A business owner risking everything to expand a factory. A parent overseas sending a piece of their paycheck back home. She doesn't know all these stories, of course, but the sense that this is real money, from real people, never fully goes away. A few months before that quiet night in Hanoi, the global financial world was shaken by what sounded like a movie plot. A group of hackers used the same SWIFT system to siphon off over $80 million from a bank in another Asian country. The money was funneled through shell accounts, washed through casinos, and then disappeared. That incident became known as the Bangladesh bank heist.
Bangladesh heist was the greatest bank robbery that almost was.
For people like Lan, it was a reminder that behind those dry lines of code, there are always invisible hands trying to slip in. Almost no one imagined that a version of that script would be tested at a Vietnamese bank, and fewer still would guess it would land right on Lan's screen, under the harsh white office lights, next to a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. From Lan's side, it's just white office lights and the soft hum of a fan. But on the other end of that connection, the story starts in a very different room. Not a sleek boardroom, but a rented apartment with the curtains pulled shut. A few young men sit hunched over their laptops, eyes fixed on the glow of their screens. trying to break into the financial system of a country they've never even visited. They know they can't just smash straight into the bank's core systems. That part is wrapped in firewalls and guarded by security engineers who do this for a living, so they go after the weaker link. The small software vendors that build the connectors between the bank and the SWIFT network. Tiny companies, small teams, modest offices, but holding the keys to the pipes that money flows through. In one of those offices, the vendor's engineers are just doing their regular 9 to 5. They get requests from the bank, push updates, fix bugs. To them, it's just another service contract. But to the guys in that dark apartment, this is the back door. If they can slip a few lines of code into the right place, every SWIFT message passing through can be watched, altered, or completely faked. The plan starts quietly. A support email goes out with an attachment dressed up as a technical document. A link to a new update shows up in an internal chat. All it takes is one tired click, one moment of not paying attention, and the malware sinks its roots into the server that sits between the bank and the outside world. The computer still works fine. Everything looks normal, but from that moment on, there's an extra set of eyes on the other side of the screen. The code they're using isn't random. It's a refined version of tools that have already been tested elsewhere. It knows how SWIFT messages are structured. It knows which field holds which piece of information. It can mimic the rhythm of a real employee's activity. It doesn't crash the system or draw attention. It just lies low and waits for the right moment to step in. What makes it really dangerous is how human it feels. It preys on our habit of trusting printed reports and summary screens. When a fake transfer is created and sent, the malware handles the cleanup. It tweaks the stored files, alters the reports, and scrubs the fraudulent transaction from the places where human eyes usually look. At the center of the plan, the target is already chosen. Not a huge amount that would set off alarms, but not pocket change either. Just over €1 million, wired to an account in Europe under the name of a company that looks legitimate enough on paper. From there, the money can be broken up, pushed through layers of intermediaries, and blended into the global river of cash. On the attacker's screens, the Vietnamese bank is nothing but an address and a string of characters. They don't see the faces rushing down the hallway between meetings. They don't hear the motorbikes outside, or know that there's a woman sitting in an international payments room, carefully checking each transaction that crosses her screen. To them, this bank is just a dot on a map, a target in a campaign. It's that distance, that lack of any real connection to the people on the other side, that makes their plan feel flawless to them. They're convinced that once the software is compromised, the transfers will slide through like oil. They're betting that everyone at the bank is busy, tired, and confident in whatever the system prints out. What they never factored in was the chance that someone like Lan, on what looked like just another ordinary evening, would sense that something was just a little bit off. When we come back to Lan, the international payments floor is almost empty. Only a few office windows are still lit, white light spilling over half-finished coffee cups and messy stacks of paperwork. On her screen, the transfer for more than €1 million is still sitting there. Lan zooms in on the details and reads each line like a letter written in a language that almost makes sense. The receiving bank in Europe is unfamiliar. The company name is one she has never seen on their partner lists. The payment description is vague, with no clear contract number to anchor it to anything real. She frowns. Maybe she tells herself, it is just a new contract, a new client. At a growing bank, new names are not unusual. But then her eyes drop to the timestamp. The transfer was created at a strange hour, right up against the daily cutoff, exactly when everyone is rushing to wrap things up and go home. She opens the internal system. If this transfer is legitimate, there should be a trail, a request, a client profile, some kind of footprint. The search comes up empty. No contract matches the reference number. No customer matches the European company name on the screen. A chill runs down her spine. Lan remembers the mandatory trainings on money laundering and fraud, the warning emails she mostly skimmed. She thinks about the story her coworkers told her about the Bangladesh heist, hackers draining a bank using the international payments system itself. That used to feel like something that happened in another universe. Now it feels like it is sitting right in front of her. Her eyes drift to the corner of her desk, to a framed family photo. Her parents stand in the middle of a rice field, smiling softly at the camera. They have always believed that their daughter working at a bank meant safety, stability, a job where she helps keep other people's money safe. The thought presses on her chest. If this transfer is fake and she lets it through, that money is not just numbers. It is years of savings from people who trusted the bank without ever seeing its servers or systems. Lan takes her hand off the mouse and inhales deeply. For a few seconds, she runs through the possibilities. If she blocks the transfer, and it turns out to be a perfectly normal contract, the client might be angry. Her boss might think she is being overly cautious. But if she keeps quiet, hits approve, and there is something wrong, by the time anyone notices, that money will be gone for good. She decides she is not going to sit with that fear alone. Lan picks up the phone and calls her manager. His voice on the other end is a little rough, tired. She calmly lays out the odd details, the unknown partner, the strange timing, the missing paperwork in their internal system. She does not use dramatic words. She just keeps repeating that something about this does not feel right. A few minutes later, her manager walks into the room, shirt sleeves rolled up, top button undone. He asks Lan to pull the transfer back up on screen and zoom in on each section. Together they go over it slowly, line by line. He does not recognize the partner either, and he cannot explain why there is no corresponding request in their system. He tells Lan to mark the transaction as pending for now, not approved, then calls in someone from IT. A young engineer arrives with a laptop tucked under his arm.
Hello, Lan.
The three of them start going through the Swift system logs, checking login history, matching machine ID, comparing real time against what is recorded in the logs.
I'm finding some inconsistencies in the transaction details.
Little pieces start stitching together into something that does not look quite right. They find a login at an odd hour, from a computer that rarely handles large transfers. They see that this transaction does not follow the usual workflow, as if it has been slipped into a gap in the system. Those small red flags are enough for everyone in the room to agree on one thing: this transfer cannot be treated like any other. The city outside has slipped fully into night. In that small office, a quiet choice hangs in the air, somewhere between the comfort of assuming everything is fine and the uneasy sense that something is very wrong. Her manager looks at Lan, almost handing the final call back to her. She nods, moving the mouse with a hand that is slightly shaking but steady enough.
The transfer must be held.
She hovers over the temporary reject option. One click. The transfer is held, like a door slammed shut right in front of someone waiting at the other end of a tunnel. Lan has no idea that this tiny act has just slowed down a cross-border bank heist.
The cappuccino machine is functioning at peak efficiency today.
Affirmative. The foam texture is statistically perfect.
To her, there is only a long exhale. Tonight, she chooses to stand on the side of caution, on the side of the people whose money she guards, even though she will never meet them. After that night, life at the bank almost snaps back to normal. Employees still line up for their morning coffee, still gossip about bonuses and year-end targets. But there is one quiet difference. In the international payments room and the IT department, everyone knows there is a strange transfer sitting on hold, like a hot coal buried under a layer of ash. In the days that follow, the air gets a little tighter. The bank files an urgent report to the central bank, then reaches out to the bank in Slovenia, where that €1 million+ almost landed. On the other end of the line, the staff there are surprised by the request to stop the payment. For them, it had just looked like a clean transaction about to earn them some fees and commission. Now, suddenly, it is a question mark. The IT team starts taking the system apart piece by piece. They comb through login logs, compare work sessions, and inspect every machine connected to the middleware software. The deeper they dig, the more small things do not line up. There are traces of a strange program that seems to have run and then wiped itself. There are suspicious changes in how reports are generated. The incident is quickly shared with international cybersecurity firms. Experts at a major security company receive samples of the malware from Vietnam and line them up against code they have seen in previous attacks. It becomes clear this is not some random script thrown together in a hurry. It is closely related to the malware used in the Bangladesh bank heist and a handful of other high-profile cases. When the first conclusions reach the people running the Swift network, they are forced to send out a message nobody really wants to hear.
Member banks targeted through weak links in the ecosystem.
They insist their core infrastructure is still secure, but admit that member banks are being targeted through weaker links, places where security awareness has not kept pace with the speed of global connectivity. In Slovenia, financial police open a case and start tracing the name behind the receiving account. It is not a huge multinational, just a small, barely known company with paperwork polished enough to slip through basic checks. Under a closer look, it starts to resemble a hollow shell, built for one purpose only: to catch and move dirty money.
Trong lĩnh vực ngân hàng, sự cảnh giác không chỉ là một từ, nó là nền tảng của chúng ta. Chúng ta phải luôn cảnh giác để bảo vệ tài sản và niềm tin của khách hàng.
From a cautious choice made in a bright office in Hanoi, the story spills past Vietnam's borders. It reaches investigation rooms in Europe and closed-door meetings in the financial world. Experts quietly tell each other that if a mid-sized bank in a developing country can become a target, then nobody is really standing outside the danger zone anymore. As for Lan, what she sees are just a few internal memos.
Morning.
One staff meeting about staying vigilant, and a couple of grateful looks from coworkers. No one calls her a hero. But in the middle of all those cold numbers, everyone understands one thing. It was her very human sense of unease that pulled the emergency brake just in time. A few weeks later, life at the bank seems to slip back into its old rhythm. Lan still rides the same motorbike to work, still sits in the same seat by the window, still checks each transfer like she does every other day. Every now and then, she'll see a short, dry news piece about cyber attacks, about millions of dollars vanishing in minutes. Almost no one realizes that tucked somewhere behind those headlines is a quiet night in Hanoi, when she hesitated over a single click. Lan's story reminds us that technology can be insanely complex, and firewalls can be tall and thick, but the very last line of defense is still a real human being. It is a pair of eyes that notice when something feels off. It is that uneasy feeling that makes you pause for just a few extra seconds. And sometimes, those few seconds are what save millions of dollars and protect the trust of people who will never see the systems holding their money. But what if that night Lan had been just a little more tired, a little more rushed, or had decided to trust the automated reports completely? What would have happened then? And if a group of attackers has already tried and failed here, do you really think they will just walk away? Or are they out there right now, planning something smarter, aimed at a bank or a country that might not be so lucky? If you want to keep diving into these stories where greed, technology, and human fate collide, make sure to subscribe to Sins and Lessons, hit the like button, and drop your thoughts in the comments. In the next episodes, we will open more criminal case files, where every mistake and every decision comes with a price tag you would never want to pay yourself.